Welcome to today's webinar on managing the Clinical Competency Committee and the specific meetings. The objective on this webinar today is to enhance your CCC process to make sure that your program is successful in all aspects, both from the aspect of training the residents, but from the aspect of making sure you're compliant with all the ACGME requirements for milestone management. In today's webinar, we plan on covering it in about an hour and a half. We're going to discuss how to set up the CCC's access to the milestone review, the process to implement resident self-assessments. We're going to talk about utilizing the curricular assessment worksheet, which is abbreviated as CAW, for a structured evaluation process by the CCC and then subsequently by the program director. We will discuss the integration of performance improvement plans, or PIPs, for focused trainee development. Any place you see the term resident, this would apply to fellows as well. We'll specifically talk about CCC responsibilities and best practices. We'll also talk about the administrator's responsibilities, whether that administrator in a smaller program might be the program director, usually isn't, but sometimes they are, or if it's the residency administrator or some other administrator, what is that administrator's responsibilities and best practices. And towards the end of the meeting, we'll discuss effective semi-annual CCC meetings and how that whole process should be managed, and we'll touch on reports at the very end as well. So the first topic here is discussing our managing our annual settings. So every year, these are settings that you should set up. And the document that outlines this is the Managing Milestones. This document is accessible under the menu option My Help for administrators, and you can see the document has several components to it. Step one talks about reviewing existing evaluations, mapping your curricular milestones to EPAs, should you want to use EPAs. It also talks about mapping data to subcompetencies and milestone narratives. And then on from page 31 to 33, we have specific details on setting up the annual milestone settings and how to go about setting up those settings. The last two steps have to do with setting up self-assessments and generating milestone reports. So steps 4, 5, and 6 are really what we're focusing on today's webinar. And specifically, this topic of managing your annual settings is covered on pages 31 through 33 of that document. So first item you need to set up is to set up your milestone periods. So under that menu option, so here where you go under the menu option evaluations and you go under curricular milestone management, manage annual settings. There are two options we're going to focus on that's circled in yellow. The first one is going to be set up milestone periods. These are the periods where the system is collecting data to present it to the CCC. I want you to imagine that you are collecting evaluation data, procedure data, conference attendance data. You're collecting all types of data during the entire academic year, from approximately July till June of the following academic year. You are constantly collecting data. The Clinical Competency Committee is typically meeting twice a year. This image here in the orange is representing the times when the CCC is meeting. You can see it's illustrated as November and May when they are meeting approximately. And I say approximately, there are some variations with it, but generally speaking, most CCC meetings are occurring sometime in November and sometime in May. Well, if that's the case, we have to teach the system what is the date of our meeting. So as part of setting up your milestone periods, you're simply setting up the dates of your CCC, when they're actually meeting. You're also setting up the dates for the system to collect data. One of the tools that the CCC will use and will review today is the curricular assessment worksheet that collects all the milestone data from evaluations and displays that information for the CCC. So what we're typically doing, and I want you to look at the graphical representation, we'll come back to May and why it's highlighted in yellow, and there's an asterisk at the bottom of the page for it as well. So I want you to think about the review periods as the period of collecting data. In the first bullet point, it says May 1 through October 31. So the first review period actually goes back to the previous academic year. So it starts from May and it runs all the way through November. So if that's difficult for you to appreciate, you could think of the academic year starting July, and you can think about the idea that you're meeting in November. Just move forward with me and think about the idea that the next review period will be in May. Well, goodness, if you're going to meet in May and look at every resident's performance, what happens to all their performance for the actual month of May and June? Well, the data for May and June can't get reviewed in time for that specific academic year. So as a result, the data for this academic year's May and June, it gets tagged onto the next academic year. So as a result, residents who are graduating, and they're in their senior year of their training, you typically don't have an opportunity to look at all their data for the month of May and June. And obviously your interns, that the residents or trainees who are starting with you in July, they won't have any data from May and June either. So that's okay. The idea here is for us to be able to set the general dates of when we're going to do our reviews. Typically, the recommendation is to set up a review period that runs from May 1 to October 31, and the subsequent review date that will happen from December 1st till April 30th. So those are the two review periods. So when you actually go to the set up milestone periods option, you'll have your own individual settings. And what we're looking at here is the settings we have in our demo account. You have to select the specific academic year, and you want to make sure you've selected the option for set default periods. You are able to set PGY specific periods. So the first thing we want to do is to set up the default period based on my recommendation here. So in this screen image here, you can see that we have a rotation blocks for period 1, and we have period 2. Period 1 is from May 1 till 10/31. And period 2 is from November 1st till April 30th of 2024. So looking at the 2023-2024 academic year, we've set our review dates to correspond to when the CCC will meet. In this example, I have already enabled self-assessments for trainees. You will learn during this webinar how to set that up. Once you set up self-assessment for trainees, you will also be required to set a due date by which time the trainees are supposed to submit their self-assessments. Although you are able to set any due date you want, I recommend you set a due date that is at least up to the review period of the CCC or before that review period. In other words, if period 1 is ending October 31st, then the self-assessment due date should be October 31st or sooner. I don't recommend that you set a due date that is later, although you are able to set a later due date. Those due dates are important because the system will send automatic notifications to the residents or to the trainees, letting them know that they have a self-assessment that they have to complete. I've gone ahead and enabled our subtitles as well. Some folks are asking for that. All right, so again, reviewing the due dates here. After you set up your default periods, the next option is for you to set up PGY specific due dates. So for example, if you are a typical residency program, you've set up your default periods as recommended here, May 1 to 10/31 and November 1 to April 30th. You would then select your PGY1 and you would change the period details to be for July 1 to 10/31 for the interns and November 1 till April 30th for the interns. So for the intern year, you want to change period 1 so the start of period 1 corresponds to when the interns are typically starting their training. And at the same time, you want to make sure that you set your self-assessment due dates. If you don't already have that enabled, we will discuss that during this webinar on how to enable those. Once you set those due dates, you want to click the update values for the calendar. You want to do that when you set up your default periods, click the update values, and then when you select each PGY level, you want to also select update values to save those changes. So that's the entire process of your annual setting. So every year you set up those milestone periods. You can set them up a year in advance if you want to as well. The second item you need to do annually is to set up your CCC. The point here is for you to set up the specific CCC members and to assign them the specific trainees they are supposed to review. Unfortunately, this is one area that we see people making the biggest mistake. Many programs are assigning all the trainees to all the CCC members, and that is not supposed to be the case. The entire purpose of a clinical competency member is not just to be part of a committee that is reviewing a resident's performance by committee. Instead, each CCC member in the vision of the ACGME and how they've organized the CCC, every CCC member is a mini preceptor for the specific trainees that you've assigned to them. It is the responsibility of the CCC, this is not my expectation, this is not the my evaluations expectations, this is the ACGME expectation. Every CCC member is supposed to monitor the performance of the trainees that have been assigned to them. They are technically supposed to periodically review the performance of the resident. We'll review all this in detail as we review the CCC's responsibilities. But in this step, when you're setting up your CCC members, it's very important that you assign them the specific trainees that they are supposed to monitor. You do not need to include the program director as part of this assignment. Why? Because the program director already has access to all the trainees. So it's not necessary to select the program director as a committee member. So when you come into this section, you'll notice that there's an academic year filter that allows you to see the CCC's responsibilities for each individual academic year. You can then click on Add Committee Member in order to add a new committee member, or on the right-hand side, you can click on the Edit action. If you have an existing CCC member and you want to change their academic year responsibilities, you can go in and make those necessary changes. So if we click on Add Committee Member, it will bring up a series of steps. We will do this hands-on in just a minute. I want you to take away some of the key items first. It will bring up a 7-step process. In step 1, you're going to select the specific CCC member for a specific academic year. So you have an academic year filter. You want to change your filter to attending and select the specific academic CCC member. Again, because you're creating a relationship between a CCC member and specific trainees, typically in step one, you should select just the one CCC member. So in steps 2 or 3, depending on whether you're a residency or a fellowship, you can assign the appropriate trainees to that CCC member. You do have an extra option on this page to enable administrative access to evaluation and milestone management. Should a CCC member also be part of your evaluation design process or your milestone mapping process, you do not need to give that CCC member full administrative access into my evaluations. Instead, you can simply check off the option to enable administrative access to evaluation and milestone management, and that will give them the necessary access to the entire evaluation and milestone management module. So once you select the CCC member, you'll go down to step 2 or 3, depending on whether you're a residency or fellowship, and you'll select the specific resident or residents and or the specific fellow or fellows that will be assigned to the CCC member. So let's continue with that remainder of the requirements here, and then we'll come back and we'll look at this with actual hands-on process to make you more comfortable with setting this up. So as part of your faculty development process, we want to make sure that you share the instructions for the CCC. There's a document that's available under My Help. It's instructions for the Clinical Competency Committee and reviewing the milestones. It's a relatively straightforward document. It has quite a few picture pages, but it also has important content, specific content here on managing expectations of CCC members, best practices for using the curricular assessment worksheet, how to conduct the semi-annual review process with the trainees, and we also discussed the program director's responsibility in the semi-annual review process. So this document does provide a lot of helpful information. You can see here it reviews the various levels of the milestones and what they represent. There is a workflow that tells the CCC member what they should do, and all of this we're going to review. There are specific images in here that will show the CCC what all the various parts of the curricular assessment worksheet represent and how they work. And as I said, there's a lot of pictures in here. So although there's 13 pages to this document, they're meant to be as a detailed document so that the CCC members are not overwhelmed by not understanding what all the various features are on the curricular assessment worksheet. So that's the first step, is to make sure that the CCC instructions are made available. There's also under My Help a separate webinar titled Are You and the CCC Ready for Milestone Review and Reporting? That is a previous webinar that touches on several of the topics in this webinar. You certainly are welcome to share that webinar with your CCC members as well. Additionally, there is an AMI guide to medical education. Chapter 25 is something that is useful. This book is available on Amazon. I think the last time I checked, it's a $59 book, a guide to faculty development for graduate medical education. I think AMI does a very good job in putting together very helpful information for GME, and we are not only big supporters of them. This year we'll be present at the AMI conference as a major sponsor for the AMI conference, and look forward to seeing you there. But we also recommend their material. I find it to be very very supporting of GME. So I do encourage you to take a look at. So now let's do a little bit of hands-on on this process, specifically taking a look at what we do here as an administrator. So I'm logged in the system right now as an administrator, specifically as a program director, and I'm under the menu option evaluations. You can see in the shortcut menu, it's pointing to under main. I'm under evaluations, milestones, and curriculum. My focus for today is going to be on the right-hand side of the screen, focusing on curricular and milestone management section. So I don't want to keep repeating that. Just keep in mind, everything we're doing today will be under the menu option evaluations, under curricular and milestone management. So here you can see this menu is currently divided into 4 major components, with the reports being at the bottom. The components are how to review assessments, our annual settings, managing the milestone or EPA mapping, and another section called manage milestone options. So we're going to take a look at a few of these sections today. So for right now, we're going to focus on manage annual settings. So I'm going to click on the setup milestone periods. And you can see that we've already set up our milestone periods. You can simply go in here and put the appropriate start date, select the appropriate academic year, the calendar year, if you need to change that, and set up your due dates. Once you set up that default period, we're going to click on update values for the calendar. Now notice that I did not select anything specific in here in terms of the department. I did not change the milestone group. I did not make any changes to any of that, any of those parameters whatsoever. Especially in this demo account that I'm using, I have a ton of different milestone groups. This would simply allow me to set up different periods for different milestone groups. I also am not changing the number of periods because the CCC is meeting twice a year. We leave this value as 2. The system does allow you to create additional review periods, but that would not be appropriate for the bulk of you watching this webinar. After I set up the default periods, I can click on PGY1. Now it tells me that I'm currently displaying milestone periods for PGY1. I can then change this here and say, well, the PGY1s actually aren't starting till July 1st. Some of you have academic years that start in June, such as June 24th. Use whatever date is appropriate for the start of the academic year relative to your interns. So now I click update values for PGY1, and that's as simple as it is. Am I able to go in and set up PGY specific periods for all the other PGY levels in my program? Yes, of course you can. Typically, if you have a larger program we see typically more than 50 trainees. We have programs that have over 120 trainees in them in internal medicine programs. They will do a staggered milestone review. And what I mean by staggered is they're not all able to meet in November, so they'll do some of the milestone reviews in November, they'll do some of them in December. So in that case, you might want to delay your PGY1s because you want to get more information on them. So in that case, we can create a staggered for PGY1s and say, well, for the PGY1s, we're going to have the end date go till November 30th instead of October 31st. And then notice here, when I click tab, it automatically changed the start date for period 2 to December 1st. And if I'm going to do that, I should also change the assessment due date for the trainees as well. This will make it clean and simple. So the idea here of creating a staggered review period is only because we have so many trainees that we can't possibly review all of them in a month. We're going to do it over 2 months. So then you can adjust those review periods to reflect whatever your specific needs are. So that should be relatively straightforward. You'll notice that you always can go one academic year into the future. So at the bottom here, it shows 24-25. So if I want to, I can already go in and set up my review periods and CCC meeting dates for the next academic year in advance. That's completely up to you should you want to do that. I'm going to click on the shortcut menu, evaluations and milestones again. And we're going to go to the second annual setting option, which is managing the clinical competency committee. So we can see here we already have Dr. Adler, Dr. Alper, and Dr. Crawford listed as CCC members. I want you to notice here that for Dr. Daryl Adler, it shows that Dr. Susan B. Anthony is archived. So at some point in the past, Susan B. Anthony was a resident in the program. And Dr. Adler was in fact a CCC member that was managing Susan B. Anthony. But keep in mind that the system maintains that history. So for every academic year, you're updating the CCC's responsibilities. You're not keeping the old responsibilities. So when I click on edit for Dr. Adler as an example, I see that Susan B. Anthony is listed in here. I can remove Susan B. Anthony and I can choose to add Melinda Abalone, for example. So notice that the step one only has an academic year filter because I'm editing the profile for a specific CCC member. So there's no selection process. I'm simply editing that. You have the option and ability to add fellows, students, and other groups to this as well. At the very bottom, we have the option to enable administrative access. So I simply click OK, and that updates Dr. Adler's access. Every time you make a change to a CCC member's access into the system, that CCC member will receive an email notification letting them know that they are a CCC member and letting them know the specific trainees that have been assigned to them. We'll take a look at what they see when they log into the system. I want you to notice that I told you that I am logged in as Dr. Cindy Crawford, who's the program director. And I want you to notice that I have done what I've asked you not to do. I have made Dr. Cindy Crawford a CCC member for 3 specific trainees, and I've even assigned an attending for Dr. Crawford to review. I'm using that to illustrate something to you, but generally I don't recommend that you make the program director a CCC member because they already have all the necessary access. So from here, let's now move on to our next process to enable self-assessments. So under the Managing Milestones document, pages 34 through 38 discuss the entire self-assessment review process for you to provide you all the necessary details. It's a very simple option for you to set up. You simply go under the menu option under the evaluations milestone section. You select the milestone setup option. Under milestone setup, you enable the user access to self-assessments and provisional CAW. You also enable reminder notifications and completion due dates. Once you do that, you scroll to the bottom of the page and you click update. Very straightforward, very simple process. I'm going to review that here just for continuity before we look at the trainee's self-assessment process. So here I'm under the menu option evaluations. Under the manage milestone options, we go to milestone setup. Under milestone setup, you want to make sure you have these 2 features enabled. Enable user access to self-assessment and provisional CAW. And what that does is it actually enables the whole self-assessment process for them. And the second option is enable reminder notifications and completion due date. Once you have both of these options enabled, Now, when you go back to your setup milestone periods, you will see the option for self-assessment due date. If those options are not enabled, you will not see the option for self-assessment due dates. So once you have this enabled, make sure you click update at the bottom of the page to save your changes. Now the trainees will also have access to doing self-assessments. So they're able to use either their mobile device or through the web interface to access self-assessments. So in the current iteration, so this webinar is being conducted in a transition period where approximately in the next 12 days, we are transitioning to the new home screen with a new performance dashboard. Obviously, we'll come back and review all of these with the new performance dashboard and the new homepage. But currently, the residents are able to go to review milestone performance, and they can either click on review milestone performance or to click on the milestone performance name listed under the graph itself that shows their performance. And they can do that on their mobile device to actually do their self-assessments. On either of those sections, whether they're looking at it on the mobile device or they're looking at it on a computer, they have a similar view to the curricular assessment worksheet. The only difference is they are able to do only hands-on review of their own self-assessment. They are not able to go into the system and do other things. They can't change any scores from the final score. This is purely based on their own self-assessment of their own performance. So let's take a look at this in real time and see what that process actually looks like. So here I'm logged in as a resident, looking at the current interface. I have my evaluation section. If I close that, I have my learning assignment section, and here I have my milestones and performance improvement plans. We'll talk about the PIPs a little bit later on. So I can click on review milestone performance here. That's going to bring access to the milestone performance for me to review. And in this particular demo department, we've defaulted to pediatrics. I'm going to go ahead and change this. The resident would normally not do this unless they're a med-peds resident and they're switching between two sets of milestones that have to be reviewed on them. I'm doing that specifically for purposes of the demo. So in the current interface, this is what we're able to see. We can see here that the resident has access for automatically, it's gone to period 2. It's showing that period 1 is already finished. If they go to period 1, we're going to review this later on, but when they actually go to period 1, it's not going to allow them to do a self-assessment. It says the self-assessment has already been finalized for this period, and it says the self-assessment is no longer accessible. In the event that the resident had actually accessed this page after the due date and they had not done a self-assessment yet, well, in that case, the resident would not have that option to save either. It would tell them that the self-assessment period has already expired. So this gives you a good perspective on how all of that works. Now, this is the current view that the resident has. This will be the new view that the resident will have with our update that's coming out in the next 12 days. They have access to the curricular assessment worksheet. It has same data functionality on it. We're looking at pediatrics again here. I didn't switch to internal medicine. They have access to their in-training exams and all the other details. The main difference here is the My Insights is a new set of information that will be listed. Let me go ahead and select internal medicine in here. The main difference in the new design will be the inclusion of My Insights. And you can see for pediatrics, the message there was pending final review. For more information on the specifics of the My Insights details, I recommend that you review some of the previous information we've discussed on My Insights. But as a quick review, the My Insights is generated twice a year. The first data set was generated for May 1st to October 31st of last academic year, and the next one will be generated for November 1 through April 30th of this academic year. So the new set of My Insights narratives will be available approximately the first week of May. The commitment that we've made for My Insights release will be no later than May 12th, 2024. So you can see in that in the new criteria what the setup for the resident will look like. This is where they go in and they would then put in their own self-assessment. You can see as the resident hovers over these, they can see the milestone data. In the current iteration, if I switch to period 2, the resident has the same functionality where they're able to go in and do their own self-assessments. It's just that we have a new interface. We also have the inclusion of new information such as My Insights that didn't exist before. So that gives you a very quick and clean view of the resident, understanding that the resident is going in and giving their own self-assessment. Now, once we get to the part where we're going to discuss the CCC's responsibilities, we'll talk about how that self-assessment appears and what do we do with that self-assessment. So now I want to turn my attention to administrative responsibilities and CCC responsibilities and how we go about those. So talking about administrative responsibilities and how to prepare for the CCC. The most important aspect is outlined here. Number one, the administrators who are managing the CCC conference should only click Save and Finish Later. We want you to limit the use of the finished final submission to the program director. We're going to discuss that. The program director during their semi-annual review with the trainee should be the one who's actually clicking the finished final submission. So during that meeting, please don't click finished final submission. Let that be solely the responsibility of the program director during the CCC meeting. I'm going to reiterate that when I'm talking about CCC members and what they should be doing as well. It's very important that during the CCC meeting, you have a strong internet connection. If you're using Wi-Fi, make sure that's a strong Wi-Fi connection. If you have a weak Wi-Fi connection, the pages will take a lot of time to load. Preferably, you should have a hardline connection to the internet, but having a strong internet connection is very important. The computer that you're using should have a minimum of 16 gigabytes of memory. If your computer has 4 gigabytes of memory or 8 gigabytes of memory, everything is still going to work, but it's going to be much slower. Memory allows the computer to retain information. If you don't have enough memory, it can't retain the information, so it starts to use other ways to hold information. Those other ways to hold information will slow everything down for you. Now, the other important aspect is for you to use 2 browser sessions simultaneously, and I want to discuss this in detail with you so you understand what that means. When you are conducting a CCC meeting, and I'm going to bring up a screen and go through this process with you. So let's say I'm conducting a CCC meeting and I go to curricular assessment worksheet. Now, keep in mind that this is a webinar. We are doing this live. At the same time, not only am I doing this live, but I have video connection and a lot of other things, and I do have a fairly strong internet connection. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select the trainee that I want to review. Notice here that on the top right-hand side, I'm logged in as Cindy Crawford, who's the program director. The program director already has access to all the trainees. Why are these trainees colored blue? They're colored blue because those are the specific trainees that have been assigned to the program director. And this is the only thing that I wanted to demonstrate to you, what happens if you assign specific trainees to the program director. The system will simply highlight it for them. Now, when I select John Adams, there's a delay period for all that data to be displayed on the page. Now, I look at the performance of this page, and I can see that the load time was 8.7 seconds. That's relatively reasonable. But if you don't have a computer that has enough memory and you don't have a strong internet connection, well, that loading time can be significantly increased. So what I advise you to do is to run 2 sessions simultaneously, and these are the instructions. And I'm going to come back to this screen first and show you how to do that. I have 3 screenshots here for you of the most common browsers that are used. And normally when you open up a browser, it's going to start what we refer to as a session. So when I open up a browser and I log into my evaluations, I have now established a connection or a session. On that browser, even if I open up 10 different tabs, all of those tabs will be part of the same My Evaluations session. What we want to do is we want to create 2 separate sessions. The way we do that on Firefox is on the top right-hand side, you click on the menu option in your browser, and you select the option for New Private Window. That new private window allows you to start a brand new session, meaning with that new browser, you will then go to My Evaluations again, and you will log in another time. In Chrome, you have that option. It's referred to as New Incognito Window. And in Microsoft Edge, it's called a New In Private Window. So in all of those, you have the option to create a new session. So let's look at this as an example. I'm logged in as Cindy Crawford. I have a session. I brought up John Adams. Now, why do I want a separate session? I want a separate session so things can move faster at the CCC meeting. So I will not just open up another tab here. Instead, on the top right-hand side, I'm going to click on the menu and I'm going to ask for a new private window. I'm going to go back to my evaluations and I'm going to log in as the same exact user. Now, the benefit there of logging as that same user, I can go to the evaluations menu, I can go to the curricular assessment worksheet, and I can have 2 simultaneous sessions happening on my screen. So I have on my left-hand side, and I'm just showing you the benefit of doing that. On my left-hand side, I have John Adams, and on my right-hand side, I can go ahead and select yet another resident. So I'm going to go to Internal Medicine 2.0, and I'm going to select Melinda Abalone. So while that's happening, on this side, I can go to the evaluations menu. I can go to curricular assessment worksheet. I don't have to wait for what's happening on the other session. Each one of these sessions are operating independently, and there is no delay of activity. So while that's happening, is I can switch to another person on this side, and we can start working on this while the other session is coming up. So I don't have to worry about causing a delay. And you don't have to have both pages up like the way I have it. You can simply have one page up. When they're done, you've gone through, you've reviewed everything, you click Save and Finish Later at the bottom, and you can then pull that out of the way while that page is saving, and you can put the next browser on the screen, and everyone can start their review process while that page is saving in the background, so it has absolutely no impact on your work. So that's the easy way for you to make sure that you can operate the CCC in a smooth manner without creating any delays. So during that CCC meeting, let's talk about now the CCC's responsibilities. So the CCC is supposed to review the curricular assessment worksheet. On the curricular assessment worksheet, they have a number of parameters that they should be reviewing. There's a clear supervision section. There's a section where they can see their in-training exam scores. That's all information that you can populate through My Portfolio under the section for examinations. You can upload each academic year's in-training exams. The CCC members are also should be responsible for initiating performance improvement plans. This webinar is not going to get deep into performance improvement plans. We have a separate webinar specifically targeting performance improvement plans and what they represent. The main idea that I want to reiterate here, a performance improvement plan is not punishment. A PIP does not say that you're being put on notice because we plan on letting you go. A performance improvement plan are milestone specific, competency specific areas of weakness that you are identifying to help the resident improve. I encourage you to go to My Help and review the document that we have there that extensively discusses PIPs and best practices for utilizing PIPs. We also have a separate webinar that talks about that, and I encourage you to look at that webinar. Shy of that, I'm not going to go into a lot of details with that. Now, as part of the CCC meeting, we're going to look at all of this live as well. I am encouraging your CCC members to only select the Save and Finish Later button. I don't want your CCC members to finish the CAW, because when you click Finish, the resident will get a notice to review their curricular assessment worksheet and their milestone performance. And it's really best to have that happen after the fact, when the program director has had their semi-annual meeting with the trainee to review their in-training exams, to review their milestone performance, to review their levels of supervision. So you want to keep those things separate from each other. And then let's take a look at some screenshots of the performance improvement plan before we go look at it in live, just to get some ideas. When they click on this option here for performance improvement plans, it says review performance improvement plan, or it'll say initiate performance improvement plan if one hasn't already been initiated. You'll see that the page will automatically select the competency based on the competency you had initiated from the CAW. There are different expected behaviors, and for those behaviors, there are areas of weakness and specific actions that they're going to take. So I selected area of deficiency. I will write in the weakness or select a weakness, identify what needs to be done to make that correction. I set a date of reevaluation and track the current status. There's a separate space for tracking administrative comments separately from user comments. So, and we'll take a look at this in a live session in just a minute. So from the CCC's point, we want them to click only the Save and Finish Later. Their main responsibilities at the CCC level should include the following. Each CCC member should be very familiar with the subcompetencies and the milestones. The instruction document that we have provided for the CCC does not include the actual sub-competencies. That's something you should give them separately as a document. They should be familiar with each sub-competency, and they should be familiar with the various milestone levels. CCC members should be reviewing the curricular assessment worksheet periodically. They should not be reviewing it for the first time during a CCC meeting. They should have reviewed this on a periodic basis in order to monitor the residents' performance. So by the time we come to the CCC meeting, they should have already written some comments in terms of recommendations. They should have already reviewed the My Insights that have been released on the residents. And by clicking Save and Finish Later, that makes the My Insights available for the residents to see. And they should only click the Save and Finish Later, and they should be prepared to present each trainee during the CCC meeting. So if you want a CCC meeting to move efficiently and in a timely way, if your CCC members have taken the time to do everything that's outlined here, it should be a very straightforward, quick presentation by each CCC member. Now, once the CCC has completed the responsibility and the CCC meeting has ended, we now turn to the program director's responsibility. The program director has the responsibility to do a semi-annual review with each trainee. This is outlined as part of the common program requirements that on a semi-annual basis, a program director should review a trainee's performance with them. During that semi-annual review, the program director should review each one of the sub-competencies and the resident's final score as outlined by the CCC, review the individual comments. This is why we don't want you to click Finish Final Submission, because you are now submitting it to the trainee before they've even had a chance to meet with the program director to discuss their own specific concerns. So by allowing the program director to specifically meet with the trainee, they can review all this information. They can also scroll to the bottom and review the individual areas for overall comments, strengths and areas of excellence, and specific comments about weaknesses and areas for improvements. At that time, only after the program director has reviewed all of these details, then the program director should go in and click the option for Finished Final Submission. Otherwise, we don't want that to be done ahead of time. So then what we have here is a meeting with the resident to review everything, and we go ahead and click Finished Final Submission as the final step. That's going to happen only after that section, after that's done by the program director. Now, I've now reviewed with you the administrative responsibilities. I've reviewed with you the CCC responsibilities. I've reviewed with you the program director responsibilities, and let's take a look at now the trainee responsibilities. So when you click Finish Final Submission, the trainee will receive an automatic email notification asking them to review their milestone performance. So yes, they already did a self-assessment separately. That self-assessment was simply going through and giving themselves a score of where they think they are on the milestones. Now the CCC has submitted their score. The program director has reviewed everything with you, and the program director clicks Finished Final Submission. The resident gets an automatic email notification, and they're able to go in and review those. They can document any of their concerns that they still have, and they scroll to the very bottom, and they have an option there to, not an option, but a requirement there to confirm that I have reviewed my semi-annual performance for the particular period. There's a yes/no option that's already in there. They are required to answer this question before they can click the option for I acknowledge review of this milestone performance report by the CCC. So before they can click that, they have to answer that question. What's really terrific in my evaluations is the system will track if the resident has even looked at their milestone review and will track the acknowledgement separately. So if the resident does look at it, but they don't acknowledge it, the Ledger of Assessments report will show you that it will show the date that they looked at it, but it will tell you that they have not acknowledged it. The idea here is for you to have a clear documentation that the resident was presented with a semi-annual review. The program director's comments will indicate that they met with the resident on a semi-annual basis, and the resident has to acknowledge this document. And when they acknowledge this document, it will show in a Ledger of Assessments report that you can show during a site visit for confirmation that you're actually meeting the requirements for the semi-annual review. So we click, I acknowledge review of this milestone performance report by the CCC, and that's the sum total of it. So let's now get into some specific review of some specific points on the curricular assessment worksheet itself. So this is a quick screenshot of the current curricular assessment worksheet. As I mentioned, we're in a transition period to the new curricular assessment worksheet, which has quite a few new features in it. So let's review that as part of your hands-on process. Seem to have a frog in my throat today. All right. So let's take a look at the current review process, and then we'll go in and take a look at the new review process. So at the very top here, when the CCC member or the program director accesses the curricular assessment worksheet, once you select a resident, it will automatically default to the current period, assuming that the previous period is finished. If the previous period is not finished, not saved, finished, then it will default to the previous period. That's very important to keep that in mind. So always pay attention to which period you are reviewing. Some of the key points of what the CCC and the program director should review on a semi-annual basis. Number one, clear supervision. If you don't have this enabled, it's because someone in your department has disabled it. Otherwise, it is enabled by default. If you need to re-enable the clear supervision requirement, you can go to the menu option, procedures. Under procedure and error tracking setup, manage supervision requirements, and you want to enable tracking of supervision requirements, and you want to enable tracking of supervision requirements in the curricular assessment worksheet. You want to check off both of those options in order to make them active. There is no need for you to save. You just need to check off both of those options. So once you select those options, you'll see this functionality here. What is the purpose of this functionality? When you click on that functionality, it's going to give you a list of all of the procedures and tasks that your trainees are able to perform in the department and at what level of supervision they need to track them. As per the common program requirements, it is the program director and CCC's responsibility to, at least on a semi-annual basis, to review the level of supervision required for the trainee for every task they are supposed to complete. So this shows me, for example, that for this resident, he has completed 79 abdominal paracentesis. He has 5 pending. There were 5 required for him to do, so he's done 79. On average, residents in his training level will have done 12, and currently he is set to have only oversight. So you control the 4 levels of supervision as defined by the ACGME in terms of what level of supervision they need. You, meaning the CCC, and the program director have a responsibility to look at this on a semi-annual basis. This can also include things such as admissions. So you might have simply a procedure called admissions. And even if the residents are not actually reporting their admissions through my evaluations, you can document that, hey, in order to do admissions, this resident needs oversight, or this resident needs direct supervision to be physically present. So you want to document all those levels of supervision that are required as part of your semi-annual review of the resident's performance. The in-training exams are listed here as well. As I mentioned, if you go under the menu option for My Portfolio, select that specific resident, you'll have an option here for examinations. And under examinations, you have not only their board exams, you also have My Quiz, and you have the ability to track their in-training exam, and any outside examinations that are done can be tracked through here as well. For the in-training exam, you select the specific academic year, you put in their particular score in here, and that's as simple and straightforward as it is. So you don't have to actually go to the top to change anything. You can just select each academic year and populate their score, and that will automatically update the data into the curricular assessment worksheet. So there's no save option here. You simply select the academic year, put in the score, and you can move on to the next trainee. I'm sorry, the one thing that we do need to do, my apologies, we do need to click the edit update option in order to populate that information here. So my apologies. So once you click edit update, you can put that information in here in terms of the raw score. This department early warning score is a score for the entire program. This is the score that will trigger an early warning. So since this resident's performance is below 80, it marks it as EW because their score is below, or 85 in this case, is below whatever the standard is. So let's review the rest of the responsibilities. Now the CCC will go through the curricular assessment worksheet in terms of each requirement in here. In this example, we don't have any provisional score that's already been calculated. So the CCC is able to expand the details to see if there's any specific data made available for the resident based on assessments that were completed on the resident. I'm switching to another period just to show some specific data details in here. What I did is I've gone to the previous period, and I wanted to show you how I'm able to make changes or to modify scores. So I clicked on the undo option just to expand that. Under each one of these sections, you will see the individual EPAs and the curricular milestones that are mapped with data to this section, allowing me to review their individual performance. So as I go through each one of these options, meaning each one of these sub-competencies, you'll notice, I'll stop here as an example under professionalism. There's a space for the CCC member to give a final score. They would see the resident's self-assessment score here. In this case, we can see that the resident has not issued a self-assessment score here, and any provisional scores would be displayed on this line here. We have a similar format in the new system, and we're going to review that as well. This would be an area where the CCC member would be able to give a write a comment in here. If they felt that the resident's performance is not up to par, the black line here represents the national average. I'm sorry, the benchmark, and the blue line here represents the national average for trainees in internal medicine at this PGY level. Well, in that case, the CCC member can click Initiate Performance Improvement Plan. That's going to bring up a pop-up. Now, because I was under professionalism, notice that professionalism is automatically highlighted for me here. Now, under professionalism, we have already defined very specific types of expected behavior. These are listed here on the left-hand side. There is a separate webinar on managing your performance improvement plans where you can create custom expected behaviors. These are the default behaviors and details that we've populated in my evaluations. So you can see that we're looking at the 23-24 academic year. We're looking at ACGME Internal Medicine 2.0. We're looking at John Adams, and we're looking at professionalism 1 subcompetency, so PR1. So if I look at this and say that functions in a safe and effective manner consistent with what is expected of a professional physician is an area of deficiency, when I check that off, now I'm able to identify the weakness, the action, and all the other details. So for an area of deficiency, we in many cases have already pre-identified weaknesses and actions. So if you select the predefined weakness, for example, you can do it this way, or you can select other. And if you select other, it lets you type in whatever you want to type in that section. So we'll say performs in an unsafe manner. And what's the specific action? The resident will demonstrate safe performance as evidenced by the ... is the administrative comment. So the administrator can write here, the resident had a specific issue of how they were unsafe, and this is what I want them to do. So again, the idea of initiating a performance improvement plan, I'm giving you very brief without going into the full details, that's on a separate webinar, is for you to elaborate on an area of weakness or a specific deficiency that the resident can, today is the 21st, the resident should be able to demonstrate this within a short period of time, like a month from now. We should be able to reassess the resident's performance, or even a shorter period of time, like 2 weeks from now. So by setting a date of reevaluation, number one, when I actually review and sign this by updating this as a CCC member, the resident will receive a notification that there is a performance improvement plan pending for them. The resident will then be able to review this. The resident will also have the ability to write user comments there as well. So the entire process of a PIP is to set reasonable areas of improvement for the resident. It's not meant to be as a punishment. You're not doing a good job and we're putting you on notice. Unfortunately, some institutions have taken the verbiage of a performance improvement plan and they've turned it into a punitive plan. And they initiate a PIP only when a resident's performance is suboptimal and they want to put the resident on notice for legal reasons, such as for termination. So this is not what the purpose of a performance improvement plan actually is. So the CCC is able to go through here and complete all of these areas. You'll notice that there is a separate ending for each section. So as you finish one section, they have to indicate whether the resident has demonstrated satisfactory development for that particular competency. And then at the very end, they have areas for writing their recommendations. You can see the user's overall comments. You can write about strengths, weaknesses, and there's a space for the CCC to write confidential comments that are in fact not seen by the resident. And they would not click finish, they would click save and finish later. and we would leave the finish option strictly for the program director to do, and not specifically for the resident. Now, as you go through, if you are missing something, meaning if there's a particular score missing someplace on the assessment, when you click Finish Final Submission as a program director, it will tell you to complete items that are missing in red. Let me now bring up the new options. I want to review those with you. Just bear with me for a second to bring up another screen. All right, now let's take a look at how it's going to look in the new process for the CCC. So we're going to go ahead and select that same trainee. We're looking at the internal medicine 2.0. We have a loading parameter that's happening right now. We can see both on our mouse. The screen is loading, and that was a relatively quick loading time. And what do we get in this instance? Well, we can see that period 2 is marked as unfinished. So as I scroll down, I can see my insights are listed here. We can see that this My Insight was originally reviewed on March 8th by Cindy Crawford and is available to the trainee. So it marks it as reviewed and modified. So that tells you that someone has already reviewed this and made the My Insights available. As a quick review, My Insights is a new AI functionality that we've added in My Evaluations. We are utilizing artificial intelligence to review all the narrative comments that are written on the resident over a 6-month period, and the system will summarize all the narratives that are written by the faculty and organize it by the 6 core competencies, and will also provide an overall My Insights with specific breakdown on strengths, areas for improvement, and an overall comment on how they're doing overall. This is an example of an actual comment. So we can see we still have the graphs as we did before. We have our in-training exams listed here. A new item that we've added into the curricular assessment worksheet is what we call additional exams. So this will list all the examinations that they've taken through the quiz module in here as well. And our requirements for managing levels of supervision is available here. So we can click on Edit Requirements. That will bring up our edit requirements for supervision. And then we go down to patient care, and we're able to review each one of the sub-competencies. So now, because we have the introduction of My Insights for each competency, we'll see that those comments are also broken down by the initial months and the most recent months. Because we're looking at 6 months of data, the system is considering how they did at the initial period of the 6 months and how they did at the most recent part of those 6 months. So that's what you see here as your overall My Insights. So in the old curricular assessment worksheet, or what you currently have accessible, at the end of every section, you have a summary section on the resident's performance. We've moved that summary section to be directly under patient care. So when we're looking at patient care, their status and readiness is actually listed here. So we can click yes or conditional on improvement. So that allows you to go through that. This status and readiness color will change based on any deficiencies the resident has. And then CCC is able to review each one of the individual items here. They would then give the appropriate score. They're able to look at details. They're able to initiate performance improvement plans, just like we have already reviewed. And they would go through, again, that entire review process, just like they normally would, and come to the very bottom of that report and this is how the new comments section is listed. They have their general comments and recommendations, confidential comments, strengths and areas of excellence, weakness and areas for improvement. Any user comments are automatically listed on the right-hand side. Any program director review would be listed here at the bottom. And at that point, the CCC, you would select this option that the CCC has reviewed the resident's performance and move forward with either, if it's the CCC, you click Save and Finish Later, and the program director would click Finished Final Submission. So heading into the last part of today's webinar, we want to touch on our milestone-specific reports. The main reports that you're going to focus on here will be the milestone narrative report. That's reviewed in the Managing Milestones document, pages 39 to 51. That talks about the reports. I've reviewed this in previous webinars as well, but the report that you're going to run associated with the CCC meeting will be a milestone narrative report. You're going to select only the option for final only in the performance score, and you're going to select excluded for all the options as I've shown on the screen, and that's going to generate a final performance report. You're then able to export that into Excel by clicking the option to export to Excel, and that's just a very straightforward and easy way for you to review the performance and put your information into the ACGME ADS system. So what I want to review with you now are these reports very briefly, because they're important reports. And so there's actually two reports under the milestone section we're going to look at. It'll be the curriculum milestone report, and the other one is the ledger of assessments. So the curricular milestone report, as I've reviewed many other instances, very straightforward and simple report. You would select one or all the residents that you need to run the report on. For the sake of time, I'm only going to select one resident. Sorry, I selected the wrong report. The milestone narrative report is what I should have selected, not the curricular milestone report. So under the milestone narrative report, we're going to select either one resident or all the residents. Because this is a demo account and I do have other milestones listed in here, I'm going to select my internal medicine milestones. I will select just one resident for this example. Notice that there are filters here where I can run this report on different academic years, and I can also choose to look at my archived residents. So if you need to run a report on previous academic years, you can do that. So for the data that we want to run is on the current academic year, let's say on period 1. What I instructed you is that you only select the final only option. You select exclude for all the other options, and then you generate that report. So this is one of the main reports that you should be generating for your milestone review process. The other report that's useful for you to run, we're going to take a look at right after this one generates. And this is also another idea of when I talk about generating 2 sessions at the same time. That's the idea here as well. So if you have an operation that's happening like this operation that's happening here right now, you're able to open up another browser by setting another session and let that report run in the background while you are simultaneously running a new session. So I can let that run. I go to the menu option reports, and it lets me do 2 things at the same time instead of waiting for things. So the other report I want you to be familiar with is the ledger of assessments. The ledger of assessments is very similar to the ledger of evaluations report. It allows me to see what the completion status is on all my trainees. So I'm going to focus on internal medicine, and I could go in and I can select all my residents. So I just clicked on add local, and I say, well, for period 1, I want to know all the completed assessments and I want to know all the pending assessments. So I click generate report. And the nice thing about this report, it tells me, aha, we have a curricular assessment worksheet that's completed on John Adams for period 1. It was completed on March 21st because we clicked finish final submission today. The reviewer was Cindy Crawford. The total amount of time spent on this was 3 minutes. The status has not been reviewed by the resident yet. Yes, the CCC said they have made this available to them, to the resident, and the resident has not yet acknowledged receipt of the milestone review. So there's no date of review and there's no self-assessment by the trainee either. So you can see the report very clearly shows us the names of all the trainees, the current period, if their data has been reviewed, who has reviewed it, how much time they spent, and if they've done their self-assessment. So this becomes a very useful report for you to be able to see what's the status. Do we have the everyone's assessments completed for the current year? Has the PD met with everybody already? So this is the milestone narrative report here. You would then click export to Excel. I'm going to open up that Excel file. And there's my data on John Adams. As I've mentioned in the past, I recommend that you do the Excel option only because it's much easier for you to follow down the scores that you need to key into the ADS. It makes it much, much easier for you to go through that process. So that should make it much easier. And that summarizes our entire webinar on managing the CCC meeting. Any questions? All right, let's see what questions we have here from the group.